Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas by going directly to the source material. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating debate about how we actually solve complex problems. So here's the big question at the heart of it all. When you're trying to connect ideas from totally different fields, what do you need more? Do you need a detailed map that lays out every single step of the journey? Or is it better to have a trusty compass that just points you in the right direction and lets you figure out the path as you go?
Okay, so let's dive into the first side of this argument, the case for having a clear, structured plan. In other words, the map.
So you've got this scholar, Rick Szostak, and he's basically saying, look, if we're serious about tackling a problem from multiple angles, we need a process. He came up with this really detailed framework because he believes that while one person might cut a corner here or there, the whole community of researchers is stronger if they have a shared, structured path to follow.
You can basically boil down his whole 12-step process into these 4 key stages. And it makes a lot of sense, right? You start with a really clear question. Then you go see what everybody else has already said about it. After that, you pull all those different ideas together, and finally, you test your new insights and share them with the world. It's designed to be a super thorough and reliable roadmap.
And this quote really gets to the heart of his thinking. You see, Szostak's goal wasn't to be this rigid rule maker or to put people in a creative box. He wanted to build a universal framework, a map that anyone could use to make sure that no important stones were left unturned along the way.
But what if the real work, the truly innovative stuff, is just messier than that? What if it's more creative and can't be squeezed into a neat little checklist? Well, that brings us to the other side of the debate.
Enter Linn Mackey. He reads Szostak's proposal and basically says, hang on a second, that's just not how discovery actually happens. For Mackey, the process isn't about following rules. It's driven by intuition. It's much, much more like a compass, pointing you towards something interesting than a map with a pre-drawn route.
And to really show you what he means, Mackey tells this great story about how one of his own research papers came to be. It all started when he read this article by a really famous scholar, Stanley Fish, who argued that, essentially, truly combining different fields in a meaningful way is impossible. Mackey read that and felt, okay, challenge accepted. Now, get this. He didn't start with a formal research plan or a systematic literature review. Instead, this one little phrase just popped into his head and wouldn't leave him alone. Fractals or fish. That was it. That was the spark. A catchy, creative, almost poetic connection between two totally unrelated ideas.
So he just followed that hunch, that gut feeling, that internal compass pointing him towards some weird connection between chaos theory and literary criticism. That became the entire foundation for his argument against Fish. It wasn't systematic at all. It was a journey of discovery guided purely by a creative spark.
And this is where you see the two ideas just slam into each other. Szostak's map says rule number 1 is to do a detailed survey of what's out there. But Mackey, in his own words, admits, I performed a cursory literature survey at best. This isn't just a minor disagreement. It's a fundamental clash between two completely different philosophies of how knowledge is made.
And Mackey doesn't stop there. To really drive his point home, he pulls in a powerful lesson from the history of science itself, arguing this isn't just about his personal style, but about how we understand knowledge, period.
He draws this really powerful comparison. For ages, we were all taught about the scientific method, right? You probably learned it in school. It's this very neat, step-by-step procedure. Problem, hypothesis, experiment, conclusion. A perfect logical map.
But then, right around the middle of the 20th century, a bunch of philosophers of science came along and just blew that whole idea out of the water. Thinkers like Polanyi, Popper, and especially Thomas Kuhn showed that science is actually way more creative, messy, and intuitive. Popper even said that brilliant hypotheses can come from hunches, or even dreams.
And Kuhn sums it up perfectly here. You don't need a rule book to understand how a great scientist works. So Mackey's question is pretty simple. If even the hard sciences, like physics, aren't just a rigid step-by-step process, why in the world would we expect combining different, complex fields to be?
So where does that leave us? Is it map versus compass, a fight to the death? Rules versus intuition? Or is there maybe a way to bring these two really powerful ideas together?
And this is where it gets really smart. Mackey doesn't just say, throw the map in the trash. He actually finds a brilliant role for it. He suggests Szostak steps are super valuable, just not at the beginning. They're a post hoc check, a a checklist you use after all the messy, intuitive, creative work is done, just to make sure you didn't miss anything obvious. And this table just lays it out perfectly. They're not opponents, they're partners. The compass, your intuition, that's for the creative spark, for finding your way when you're in truly unknown territory. The map, the structure, that's what you pull out later to check your work, make sure it's solid, and explain your journey to everyone else.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it's not really about picking a side. It's about understanding that there's this healthy, productive tension between structure and freedom. You need that intuitive compass to make those brilliant creative leaps, but you also need that structured map to make sure your leap lands on solid ground.
And that leaves us with a great question to think about for ourselves. The next time you face a big, messy, complicated problem, what's your first instinct going to be? Do you reach for a piece of paper to draw a detailed map? Or do you trust your gut and just follow the compass?